travel has always had its hazards. Today, the international traveler still faces risk from crime, arrest, illness, fire, and natural disasters. An emergency is traumatic anywhere, but can be catastrophic to the traveler far from home. Problems are compounded by foreign languages and cultures and legal and medical systems. Even calling for help can be an obstacle. Today's travelers are especially concerned about terrorism, often to the unwarranted exclusion of other, more likely problems. Terrorism expert Brian Jenkins is often asked what to do about safety by anxious travelers.
I tell them, drive very carefully on the way to the airport. The fact is that statistically, one is in greater danger of serious injury in an automobile accident going across town than of falling into the hands of terrorists.
For a U.S. citizen, chances are just about as good of being killed by a pet dog's bite, better of being struck by lightning or even drowning in a bathtub than of being killed by terrorism. Numbers don't diminish the seriousness of terrorism, but they do put the danger in perspective. A traveler has enough concerns without worrying about unlikely danger. Not all travelers face the same risk. Knowing your risk can help you focus your safety efforts.
When one assesses risk, one wants to look, first of all, at the nature of the individual, whether he's a traveler, an expatriate, or what have you. If he is someone who is not well known, associated with an industry that is not controversial, then his risk would be relatively lower than someone who is quite prominent, either because of publicity or considered to have considerable wealth. Persons who are transferred abroad would have a higher risk, of course.
The second risk factor to consider is the destination.
If you're going to travel to Rio, you're concerned about possible criminal activities. So your preparation and your precautions will be to avoid being assaulted by a criminal. If you're going to travel to Colombia, then your major concern is kidnappings. So your precautions and your planning will be developed around how to avoid a kidnapping.
All kinds of risks can be reduced by making wise choices for trouble-free travel. Most people are concerned about their personal safety, but few consider the possibility of ending up on the wrong side of the law.
About 3,000 U.S. citizens are reported to be arrested every year, and from stories that we hear, with many cases not going reported, we believe that actually the number of arrested Americans is at least 10,000 a year.
The most common charge is drug possession by students and business persons. Carrying even small amounts is a serious offense in most countries. Travelers are also arrested for inaccuracies on immigration forms, as well as currency, alcohol, and customs violations.
People don't realize that when they go abroad, they are subject to those foreign laws and that the systems are totally different. For instance, in Mexico and in Spain, if a person is in an automobile accident and the police don't know whose fault it is, they are likely to arrest everyone who might be a driver. And they will keep people in custody, sometimes in prison, until they determine who's really at fault. Something which is illegal in many countries is overcharging on credit cards. In Greece, a business person, while traveling there, didn't realize that he had exceeded his credit card limit, and he was immediately jailed by the Greek authorities and held in a filthy, dirty, terrible, unacceptable prison for approximately 7 days until the matter was ironed out. He was charged with a serious offense under their criminal law.
Marie McBroom is an import-export trader who dealt in rice and oil in Nigeria. When the government was overthrown in a coup, she felt no threat from the political turmoil around her.
I never thought I would be in any kind of a danger. Furthermore, I had been going to Nigeria off and on since '64.
But she was arrested as a political suspect.
While I was having lunch, this young man came up to me and he said, "You're wanted down at Doden Barracks." So I just figured, well, maybe he's talking to someone else. And then he said, "I'm talking to you and I'm serious and hurry up."
Marie McBroom's next 13 months were spent in Kirikiri prison.
Marie McBroom was charged under a new law. We call it an ex post facto law. It said anyone who in the past had sold oil without the proper license was now subject to a criminal penalty. They set the penalty as death by firing squad.
It took the united efforts of her family, American and Nigerian attorneys, the U.S. Congress, and the State Department to win her release. She was tried and found not guilty. What happened to Marie McBroom could happen almost anywhere. In any country, the traveler has to be aware of the laws and the political climate.
In order to prevent the problem of getting involved in the foreign criminal justice system, a person should learn everything possible and practical about the foreign legal system before he or she goes abroad. If you're involved with a sponsoring group or organization, it's really up to that group or organization to teach you a summary of the relevant laws. That is, if you're going to a Muslim country, you must be told not to drink. If you're going to Malaysia, where they have penalties of death for drugs, you have to learn that. If a person is arrested, the first thing that he or she should do would be to call the consulate or embassy. That's the best place to start. It's interesting that in talking to some of the hostages who were in Lebanon, many of them felt that the worst thing, the biggest mistake they made was not having a will. Before going abroad, a person should draft a power of attorney and should put all of the real estate matters and family matters and personal matters in order.
Like legal problems, illness and accidents can happen anywhere.
1 out of every 10 travelers outside the country will have a significant medical problem. I think before one travels, one should sit down for a few moments with a pad and paper and plan out certain specifics, what they want to bring along in case there's a medical emergency. First, start with the simple things. Over-the-counter medications, the kinds of things that we take for granted here that you're not likely to find readily. One should assess the prescriptions that they need, should always carry at least twice as much as they think they might need for the time, and split the prescriptions up in 2 different locations.
Medicines must be stored in their original container to avoid possible drug arrest. It's also advisable to carry a copy of the prescription. Some prescription drugs are considered contraband in other countries.
It's important that you know not only the trade name of any medication that you're on, but the generic name, because in many countries of the world, you can only buy them by the generic name, and they may not have the same trade name that might be used wherever your home may be. You can also check carefully your insurance. What will it cover? Will it cover you at all outside the country? Repatriation and evacuations can be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. They're not uncommon bills. Evacuations and repatriations are not frequent. They're relatively infrequent. The problem is when it happens, it's horrendous.
In some countries, local remedies may be dangerous to foreigners. Your embassy or the Red Cross can recommend doctors familiar with the medical needs of foreigners. A new location may require a new awareness of symptoms.
You should be extremely careful of changes in your bowel habits, your general sense of well-being, your sleep patterns. You should be more sensitive to it for a period of time so that you're adjusting to your new environment. The first thing that you should do, should a medical emergency arise, is take a deep breath, count to 10. Don't panic. The second thing that you should do is evaluate what medical resource is available. Get the closest appropriate medical advice in the emergency.
Never be afraid to use local medical services. Don't postpone health care. A natural disaster doesn't distinguish between nationals and visitors. Everyone is subject to the local relief agencies and whatever help comes in from the outside. Communication is always a problem. Establish in advance who to call and where to go. Report yourself alive at the embassy or Red Cross as soon as possible. The best preparation for a safe trip is sound information on local risks and resources.
It's important to know before you go. To know before you go puts you in the position where you can make conscious and wise decisions about your trip and the preparations that you may need to make in order to enhance your personal safety and security.
Many organizations have advisors that can provide a briefing on travel safety.
We have the map here from Brazil, and the map of Sao Paulo. I've already marked the locations of the hotel and also the American consulate. Also, here are the locations of the nearest emergency facilities for the hospital and also for the closest police station. There are a number of problems in the area. Primarily, these are criminal problems. There are youth gangs that are roaming the streets, and any pedestrian is subject to attack.
Travelers can also turn to security consultant services, the news, and the government. In the U.S., the State Department's Citizens Emergency Center provides up-to-date information through travel advisories. Personal security begins when you plan your trip. High-risk travelers must control information divulged about themselves and their itinerary. When making reservations, ask that no title or organization affiliation be recorded. If making arrangements by mail, use plain stationery. As you pack, think not only about what to take, but what to leave behind. Toys, jewelry, reading material, and clothes considered appropriate where you live may be inappropriate in other parts of the world. Women and girls should dress modestly so they won't give off unintended signals. Everyone should choose clothes that will blend. Keep a low profile to be less of a target for crime or other problems. Your passport is a valuable document coveted by thieves. Keep it with you at all times and pack a copy or the essential information separately. Before you go, evaluate the potential implications of items carried on your person.
As an example, one of the things you should do is try to go through your wallet and get rid of items that you feel might be of a problem if you got involved, say, in an airplane hijacking. For example, if you're carrying a card such as for the American Society for Industrial Security, you wouldn't want to be identified with that particular organization. If you happen to be a member of the Society of Former Special Agents of the FBI, you would want to get rid of that. You also have to decide what you're going to be doing on the trip. If you're not going to be driving, for example, there's no reason to take your driver's license. If you're going to be traveling with cash or traveler's checks, then you eliminate all of your traveler's cards. If you're going to be using them, then you take only the limited number that you want. In some situations, depending upon your affiliation, you wouldn't even want to take any business cards with you. So what you end up with is enough to identify you, and in some cases, nothing more than that. As a tip also, in some situations, it's been found nice to keep in your wallet a family picture of some type.
Remember, the value of the family is universal. Kurt Carlson, a hostage on TWA Flight 847, saved his life just by mentioning his wife and child. You're on your way at the airport. It's the first threat to your baggage, your money, and your safety.
An airport's a public facility. Free access is a way of life at an airport. With that privilege comes certain downsides, if you will, and one of the downsides is that anyone can gain access to an airport. When you arrive at the airport, one of the things we strongly recommend is that you discourage members of your family or friends coming with you. Likewise, when you arrive, we also discourage meeters and greeters. It's terribly important that we minimize the number of people in public areas at the airport. We really don't want to present a large group of people to anyone with ill intent. One reason why we suggest getting here early is because you won't have to wait in line as long as you normally would if you get here at the last minute. This simply minimizes your exposure in the public areas. Once again, we're very conscious of what happened in Rome and Vienna and the fact that there were problems in the public areas. And we want to ensure that when people come to the airport that they're not exposed any more than is absolutely necessary. Therefore, when you come to the ticket counters at the airport, you should arrive early enough so that there aren't any long queues, process through quickly, check your bags, and leave the ticket counter promptly and move to the security screening point. At all times, keep positive control over your luggage, watch your bags, ensure no one leaves a present in your bag, deposits something that you simply don't want in your bag.
In the gate area, wait away from large expanses of glass and take note of potential barriers in case of gunfire or an explosion. On board the aircraft, select seats close to the exits and rear of the airplane. Avoid aisle seats and keep the foot area clear to crouch if something starts to happen.
When a person first arrives in a country, they should be aware of whether or not the country has a consulate, and if they're going to be there for a period of time, which may be anything from 2 days on up, they should register with the consulate.
At a hotel, the simple rules for safety apply worldwide. Make use of the safety deposit box. Request a room off the ground floor to avoid break-ins, but not too high for escape in case of fire. Count the doors to the nearest fire escape. Learn how emergency exit systems work. Travelers have lost their lives because the escape systems were different from what they knew at home. Use the hotel as a source for information on emergency facilities and the local danger of crime. And use common sense if a neighborhood is questionable.
Many people who travel around the world have this curious notion that somehow it is their God-given right to travel throughout a world, at least 1/4 of which is at war, and somehow remain above and immune to the violence that is swirling around them. There are certain areas of cities where people would not necessarily go strolling at midnight.
Whenever, wherever, if something starts to happen, it may be a matter of life and death to control your curiosity and move away quickly. Even innocent gatherings can turn ugly.
In the event, you should be visiting a foreign location and should hear strange noises or see a crowd gathering or see something clearly that represents trouble. That's not the time to be curious. That indeed is the time to, as rapidly and safely as possible, get yourself away from that situation.
That's gunfire, not firecrackers. If you hear it, get down or move away fast. Whatever your mode of transportation, be aware of dangers on the street. Don't walk or ride lost in thought. Keep an eye on your belongings and be cautious with your money. If you drive, learn the signs of auto tampering.
So if you just look around, even once a day for a week, you get familiar with the car. It's very difficult to detect a bomb unless you're really looking for it. But look, it might be taped down in here, it might be taped underneath the firewall in the back there, peculiar places.
Know where you're going, the rules of the road, and prepare to drive with safety in mind.
Whenever you're driving, make sure you got plenty of fuel. You want to make sure you have at least a half to 3/4, or if not a full tank. Make sure you lock the doors and also roll the windows up so no one can come in and pull you out of the car.
Learn to recognize the signs of surveillance.
The thing you always want to be watching for is who's around you, the type of cars that are around you. Is someone following you? If you think maybe they are, go around the block and come back. Very few people are going to follow you around the block unless they're really tailing you. And keep your eyes in the mirror so you know. If someone does come by and they start to force you over, just keep driving. Do your best to get away from them.
At home, keep a low profile to deter crime. Don't advertise your name or organization. Security measures should be appropriate to the individual and the location. This includes being unpredictable in movement and schedule, and avoiding hangouts associated with high-risk groups. It is essential that everyone in the home apply safety habits. no security plan will be effective if the door is open to anyone who knocks.
When you're working in a foreign environment, naturally you're going to deal with the local nationals there. If there are security concerns there, it is most important that you position them properly, because basically what you're telling the local is that your country isn't safe for me, and these are all the things that I have to do for me and my family to make sure that we're safe here.
At the workplace, consider information about the organization and individuals confidential. Be discreet in decor and exterior signs. Rings of security can give the clear message that the location is secure.
What we're creating here is a kind of neo-medieval society. If we look back to centuries ago, people lived in towns surrounded by walls. Architecture was built with an eye to defense. We have our modern high-tech versions of that in terms of electronic access control, closed-circuit TV, bulletproof glass, and all of these things are a normal feature of life.
Terrorism. Like crime, incidents seem random, but in fact are carefully planned and preceded by a methodical, business-like analysis of potential victims.
Target selection by terrorists is actually a two-part process. It begins with an assessment of political suitability, and we know that terrorists will acquire extensive clippings from newspapers, annual reports, all sorts of publicly available information about individuals in corporations or members of institutions who might be politically suitable targets for them. And this may involve literally hundreds of names and hundreds of files. The second level of target selection involves an operational assessment. That is, of these many people who are politically suitable, who is the most vulnerable? Now, this will involve surveillance. They will get some idea of an individual's routines, patterns of behavior. Do they keep a regular schedule? Are they surrounded by bodyguards? And ultimately, then, will identify from the political suitable category the most vulnerable target. The minimum requirement for not being a victim of terrorism is not to be the most vulnerable person on the block.
Father Lawrence Martin Jenko worked for the Catholic Relief Services in Beirut.
I was in a neighborhood adjacent to the American University, and it was the former Australian embassy. Adjacent to it was the Saudi embassy, which had been bombed, and a tank sat in front of that embassy. So it wasn't the healthiest neighborhood, and yet there are times you felt that everything was normal.
But unusual things began to happen.
I had walked down to the store one morning, and a couple of men approached me, and I spoke Italian instead of English. And they turned around. So that was the beginning that something was happening.
One day, 8 gunmen pulled Father Jenko from his car.
The first fear I had was that the car was laced with bombs and they were just going to blow it up. And it seemed as if we're near a cliff, and they were just going to drop it off the cliff and it would explode and I'd be killed that way. So all these different ways of dying were coming into my mind.
The moment of the abduction or the takeover of an aircraft is the moment of maximum exposure for the terrorists. Their adrenaline is running high, they're scared, their fingers are on the trigger, and a lot of people, when they are hurt in hostage situations, are hurt in those first few moments because they do something foolish. So, number one, keep control. Fight for control. Don't stand up. Don't shove things away. Don't do dumb things. That's number one. Number two, do nothing that will distinguish yourself from any of your fellow hostages. People who have been in the armed forces are very good at this. I mean, you have to think back. When the sergeant comes before the company of soldiers and says, I need 3 volunteers, you can see 160 people trying to be invisible. That's not bad advice. don't challenge, don't look threatening, don't over-comply. Do what you're told to do, and no more.
I had received from the American Embassy a portfolio on what to do if you are kidnapped. And so I was following those directions, not to protest and just go calmly. And I always felt that I was going to be released. It was a question of when. And the fear that went through my mind was it could be years. You know, they had no great need to release me. It could be years.
After 19 months of captivity, Father Jenko was released. Travel will always have its hazards. Even at home, risk is a fact of life. And although legal, medical, and criminal problems exist everywhere, to a foreigner, their solutions are complicated by unfamiliar cultures, languages, and systems. Statistics say the chances a traveler will become a victim of terrorism or crime are small. And although there is no protection against truly random attacks and natural disasters, exposure to all kinds of risk can be reduced by making wise choices for safety. So, know before you go. Think about security when planning and packing. While abroad, be alert and aware of your surroundings, and act if you suspect trouble. Keep a low profile, blend in with the scenery, and be unpredictable. Mentally rehearse responses to emergency situations. And remember that just looking security conscious is protection in itself. Make safety a habit. After all, good security won't detract from your travel. It will enhance it and let you enjoy all the reasons that you're going international.